At the start of any project, you feel unstoppable. Then a few weeks in, it's like running into a brick wall, face first. Maybe it's a new hobby, a new side project, or even a job. At first, everything's excited. You're motivated. You're learning. People are cheering you on. Then it hits. Progress slows. Motivation dips. It feels like the end is a million miles away. That's what Seth Godin calls the dip. It's the part where most people quit, but supposedly, if you push through, you'll end up on top. That's the big idea behind the book, The Dip. I mean, the book is so short. It could have been a TED Talk or a tweet. So before I read this book, I thought I would walk away with a clear framework when I should quit and when I should stick with it. That's what the book claims to teach. What I got instead was 80 pages of disconnected anecdotes, vague motivational one-liners, and very little practical advice. Now, I like examples. Examples help, but only if they're explained. Godin just tosses out random success stories like they're supposed to speak for themselves. Okay, great. Some people push through and succeed. Some people quit at the right time. But how do you know which path to take? Godin never really says. Instead, we get lines like this, which appear on the very first page, even before the book actually starts. Being the best in the world is seriously underrated. I read that and thought, is this a joke? Like, everybody wants to be the best in the world. That's like kind of the overwhelming motivation behind so many things that people do, so many weird things that they do, so many compulsions. But it's not a joke, it's genuine. And that's about the time when I realized that this book and I were gonna have some issues. Reading The Dip feels like watching that YouTube video where Shia LaBeouf just screams, do it, over and over again. Only this goes on for 80 pages. The book's entire thesis boils down to push through hard things, unless they're not worth it. Be the best at what you do, unless you shouldn't. Push through challenges, unless they're not worth it. Be the best at what you do, unless you shouldn't. Quit when quitting makes sense, unless it doesn't. I mean, this is the kind of wisdom you'd expect to get from a fortune cookie. To be fair, there are a few very useful nuggets. So to save you the trouble of actually having to read the book, I've tried to gather what I think are the most actually useful bits from the book. I have a number of tabs here. Some of them I'm just going to read to you. Again, so you don't have to read this book. Okay, he has this lesson that if you have an obstacle in your way, and if you're working towards a goal that you think is valuable, think of the obstacles as not so much holding you back, but they're opportunities to get better. So, for instance, here he says, the next time you're tempted to vilify a particularly obnoxious customer or agency or search engine, realize that this failed interaction is the best thing that's happened to you all day long. Without it, you'd be easily replaceable. The dip is your very best friend. Now, if you do get the dip, you start to understand, like, for yourself, however you figure it out, because he's not going to tell you how to figure it out, when you should be pushing through, then there's some really good advice about getting through the dip. Now, it's not just about getting through. It's not enough to survive your way through this dip. You get what you deserve when you embrace the dip and treat it like the opportunity that it really is. And so here he's saying, don't treat it as just a slog. Treat it, again, as an opportunity to grow. Here's a little metaphor that I liked. A woodpecker can tap 20 times on 1,000 trees and get nowhere, but stay busy. Or he can tap 20,000 times on one tree and get dinner. So focus your efforts. He really does not like mediocrity or being average. Okay, so here he says, am I being too harsh? Isn't your time and your effort and your career and your reputation too valuable to squander on just being average? Average feels safe, but it's not. It's invisible. It's the last choice, the path of least resistance. The temptation to be average is just another kind of quitting, the kind to be avoided. You deserve better than average. So I do like that. And then there's a little story, another little metaphor about supermarket lines or queues. Observing the supermarket over the years, I've determined that there are 3 common checkout strategies. My local supermarket may be like yours. It usually has 4 or 5 checkouts open. If you watch carefully, you'll see people adopting one of 3 strategies. The first is to pick the shortest line and get in it. Stick with it no matter what. The second is to pick the shortest line and switch lines once at a maximum. If something holds up your line, like the clueless person with a check but no check cashing card. But that's it, just one switch. The third is to pick the shortest line and keep scanning the other lines. Switch lines if a shorter one appears. Continue this process until you leave the store. The problem with the third strategy is obvious. Every time you switch lines, you're starting over. In your search for a quick fix, you almost certainly waste time you definitely waste energy jumping back and forth. There are cues everywhere. Do you know an entrepreneur wannabe who is on his 6th or 12th new project? He jumps from one to another, and every time he hits an obstacle, he switches to a new, easier, better opportunity. And while he's a seeker, he's never going to get anywhere. So it's kind of the same theme. Be really careful about what you choose to pursue, but once you choose it, keep moving forward. Here he says that there are certain things that you can quit without quitting the larger goal, which I think is also really useful. Yes, you must quit a product or feature or design. You need to do it regularly if you're going to grow and have the resources to invest in the right businesses. But no, you mustn't quit a market or a strategy or a niche. The businesses we think of as overnight successes aren't. We just didn't notice them until they were well baked. Okay, here's another strategy for when you're in the dip and you've decided to go through it. The opposite of quitting isn't waiting around. No, the opposite of quitting is rededication. The opposite of quitting is an invigorated new strategy designed to break the problem apart. Along the same lines, short-term pain has more impact on most people than long-term benefits do, which is why it's important for you to amplify the long-term benefits of not quitting. You need to remind yourself of life at the other end of the dip because it's easier to overcome the pain of yet another unsuccessful cold call if the reality of a successful sales career is more concrete. Now he switches over to why quitting is good. Quitting is better than coping because quitting frees you up to excel at something else. Another little story. Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, told me, we knew that Google was going to get better every single day as we worked on it. And we knew that sooner or later, everyone was going to try it. So our feeling was that the later you tried it, the better it was for us because we'd make a better impression with better technology. So we were never in a big hurry to get you to use it today. Tomorrow would be better. So that's another way of looking at a dip, that you're making your product better. You're making your project better, whatever it is that you're working on. And lastly, again, along the lines of quitting a job is not quitting your quest to make a living or a difference or an impact. Quitting a job doesn't have to mean giving up. A job is just a tactic, a way to get to what you really want. As soon as your job hits a dead end, it makes sense to quit and take your quest to a bigger marketplace because every day you wait puts your goal further away. So you see that there's a lot of back and forth on like, okay, quit when it's right. Don't quit when it's right to don't quit. But I didn't find really practical advice on how to determine that for yourself, which is what I was looking for. So if you're considering reading The Dip, I highly recommend that you don't. But if you must, please get it from your local library like I did. The Dip feels like it started as a 300-page manuscript that an editor aggressively trimmed down. But instead of publishing the good parts, they somehow published the fluff and trashed the rest. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.